West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
All right, joining us now, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Dr. Anthony Fauci. He's chief medical advisor to the president. It's great to have you back on the show. Let's start where we just heard the CDC director end her comments there about how bad this could get. This amid hearing studies about social distancing, maybe going from 6 feet to 3 feet, being okay, and that could be the answer to getting kids back to school. How do you assess the danger that Americans are in right now as we try and get everybody vaccinated, but this pandemic is still out there?
Well, if you look at the numbers, they're still at a level that are really quite risky. We have that major surge over this past winter where the numbers of cases went up extraordinarily high. We were up to 300,000 to 400,000 new cases per day and up to 3,000 to 4,000 deaths per day. Then it started to sharply decline, which is really good news. It went down very sharply, but now it's kind of plateaued, anywhere between 45, 50 and 60,000 per day. That's much better than the few 100,000 per day, but it's still at an unacceptably high level. So as the director of the CDC, Dr. Walensky, was saying just on that clip now, we've really got to be careful that we don't claim victory and pull back on all the public health measures that we know work in keeping a lid on the surging of infection. So although there is good news in the sense of the vaccine continues to get rolled out, we've gone between 2 and 3 million per day. That's very good news. Keeping that up, we're going in the right direction. But if all of a sudden we declare victory, we can risk a surge. They're seeing that in Europe. In fact, Europe is generally a few weeks ahead of us in the dynamics of the outbreak. And they had a plateauing, and then they pulled back a bit on their mitigation methods, and all of a sudden it started to surge again. We want to make sure that that does not happen here in the United States.
Dr. Fauci, it's Willie Geitz. Good morning. Good to see you. As we sat here a year ago, you and others told us to look to Europe, obviously, to see what may be coming 2 weeks later. And they're undergoing a third wave now, as you said. I'm curious to ask you about what's happening with the vaccine there. It's a different vaccine, we want to point out to our audience, AstraZeneca, but many of the countries in Europe have paused using it because some people who got the vaccine experienced problems with it. They talk about blood clots. AstraZeneca and the World Health Organization both have said those are unrelated to the vaccine. But what can you say about the safety or any concerns you may have about the vaccines being used here in the United States?
Well, right now, if you look at what's gone on, we've had, about 110 million doses have actually gone into people. About 11 to 12% of the population is fully vaccinated, and a little bit over 20% have received at least one dose. Thus far, and you have to keep following these things very carefully, there are no safety signals that turn out to be red flags. We've had some allergic reactions that we're well aware of, some anaphylactic reaction to the Moderna and the Pfizer product. It ranges somewhere between 2 to 4 per million vaccinations. That's still quite a low level of an adverse event. Other than that, there does not appear to be anything that is what we call a red flag. But this is something that's followed very carefully by the CDC and by the FDA. But so far, so good.
And what does it mean, Dr. Fauci, if you believe the polls that 20% of Americans, or maybe a little more even, say, I'm just not going to get the vaccine, whether it's I don't trust it, I've heard some of these stories online that it's not safe, I don't trust the government, whatever it is. What does it mean to the overall health of our country? Actually, here it says that 30% of all adults in this NPR PBS poll, 30% of all adults say no, they will not choose to receive the COVID vaccine. So the number's even bigger. What does it mean to the overall health of the country if those 30% ultimately don't get the vaccine?
Well, if you talk about a veil of protection or a blanket of protection over the community, namely the country, sometimes referred to as reaching a level of herd immunity, that if you do not get the overwhelming proportion of the population vaccinated, you're still going to have the virus have the capability of circulating in society because there are so many vulnerable people. And we've learned that with other infections. We've learned that with measles, particularly when you get below a certain critical level of people being vaccinated, then you have the risk and the danger of outbreaks. So the approach we would like to take, and we are taking, is to try and reach out and explain to people and ask what are the issues that make them hesitant about getting vaccinated, and try to address them with good, solid scientific facts. Is what the reason why we reach out a lot, to try and explain to people what the process was of the development of the vaccine, all the things that went into it, why it was such a quick, in the sense of rapid time frame from when the virus was first recognized to the time that we had doses into people's arms, was really a big reflection, and a good reflection, of the nature and the extraordinary scientific accomplishments that went into our being able to do that. Those are the kind of things that we continue to try to explain to people.
Dr. Fauci, we talked last week about the video that all the presidents put out, the living presidents, imploring people to go get the vaccine. There was one missing. President Trump was not in that video. So just taking politics out of this completely, President Trump had 74 million people vote for him. A lot of people listen to his every word and follow him. Have you been able to reach out to the man you worked for a year and say, Mr. President, boy, it would be sure helpful to our cause and to the cause of the country if you just came out publicly and said, I got the vaccine and you should too?
No, I have not reached out directly to him, but I do it so many ways indirectly, including the conversation that you and I are having right now about what the importance is of getting the overwhelming majority of the population vaccinated. That's very important when you're trying to contain a pandemic.
It is Tuesday, the 16th of March of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small, scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. It always has, and it always will. Speaking of the spice trade, I don't know what this has to do with the spice trade, but, it's a jumping off point. Boy, there sure are a lot of racists out there publicly announcing their racism. You had Ron Johnson saying, I gotta tell you, if those were black people in the Capitol buildings walking around, even on a tour, I would have been pretty darn afraid, wouldn't you? Yeah, well, they don't call them dreadlocks for nothing, right, Ron? And then, Tom Cotton. Of course, he's been an unabashed racist all along, but he likes to put the air of respectability on it because he is, after all, from the military, an officer, and, a pretty good school. So, they think that their racism has, the sheen of acceptability, which it is to a certain segment of our society. It's not America. And they keep saying that there's more, that America's more right than we want to admit. Actually, no. You guys are a bunch of loudmouths, and you think that your influence is, well, more outsized than it really is, I gotta tell you. Because there's a lot more of us than you, and because we're polite and we follow the rules and we don't want to act like you, doesn't mean that we don't have any power, as was evidenced in the last election. That they deny is true, because, well, that's where they are. They don't play fair. They never have. If they can't win by the rules, they break the rules. If they can't win by breaking the rules, they want to just destroy the whole game. Winning is all that matters to them, even if they have to destroy the world in the process. Because, hey, at least they won. Doesn't seem very Christian to me. Doesn't seem very heartfelt. Doesn't seem neighborly. Of course, everything about them is to not be good neighbors. They harangued us about politically correct culture, PC culture, which was just a nice way of saying that you can't force me to be a good neighbor. And now it's woke, which is just a nice way of saying, the Enners are doing it. Yeah. It's just, it's code. In many respects, they don't have to use the code anymore. But I love this term woke now, which means to white America, black people want it. If black people want it, we don't want it. So, Tom Cotton, you're an effing racist. Okay? And a Nazi, too, along with Josh Hawley and some of the rest of you. And it's beyond me that you are still sitting in a position of power when you should be in jail. Or, I don't know, at least held without bail until we can figure out what the hell is going on. But we're polite. We don't want to act like, the idiots. And I'm saying we don't have to act like them. We don't have to be them. How about we just follow the law and apply the law as it should, rather than how the referees have been gamed all this time? We can't hold the Trump kids accountable because they went after Hunter Biden. Yeah. We can't hold Ivanka because, accountable because they went after Hillary for decades and decades and decades. Oh, you're just going after a woman. Everything that they've done, they will accuse us of doing. And then we can't do the one thing, which is follow the law, because they played the refs and dirtied up the game. Well, you know what? We know how that game is played, too. And we're not going to let you get away with it. Watch us. Yeah, watch us. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, at the top, Dr. Fauci does insist that if we declare victory too soon over this COVID pandemic, we risk a surge of infections. And exactly correct. I also say we better start embracing the idea of the mask as part of our wardrobe. Many, many countries around the world in the last decade or so have been devastated by pandemics or epidemics, and also just by dirty air. When there were the fires out around here, I didn't see anybody saying, I'm not going to wear a mask because the smoke is like a liberal hoax. No, people wore masks. Okay? Why? Because particulates in the air hurt your lungs. They actually, you can feel it. It hurts. Don't breathe it in. So around here during fire season, a lot of people, if not all of them, wear masks. They don't want to breathe in all that heavy particulate matter. Who would? But I didn't hear anybody calling it a liberal hoax, so I'm not going to wear a mask so I can kick the libs. Oh, yeah, that's one way to kick us. But wearing a mask to protect your neighbor, yeah, they talk about we're good neighbors. Well, if you are, stop breathing your infections on me, please. Okay? So I'm wearing a mask. Not only because it protects me in some way, but, you know, I might be inoculated, but as far as I can tell, it's possible that we can still shed virus and other people can get it. Hopefully this Pfizer one, the percentages of not being, transmittable will hold up. I mean, percentages are percentages. You could fall in the part where you're shedding virus, or you could fall in the part where you're not. But averages are averages. You don't know where you are in the midst of it. Wear a mask. And wash your hands, too. The flu and the common cold cases have gone down precipitously because we've been washing our hands, wearing a mask, and not breathing on each other. Up close and personal, at least with people we don't know. That's my little advice from the pulpit. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? A federal judge ruled that ICE can no longer destroy records that may prove human rights abuses. Well, this might be a human rights abuse. We have to destroy these records. Yeah, well, you can't do that anymore. Let's see if they follow the law. Anti-government militia leader Ammon Bundy was arrested for failing to appear on a trespassing charge because he didn't want to wear a mask in the courthouse. Okay. And he's still in jail as we speak. And the Tennessee Senate's proposal to remove slavery as punishment for a crime from the state's constitution is meeting stiff opposition. Well, when you got racist Nazis like Tom Cotton running around, what do you expect? Marsha Blackburn, too. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the European Union launched legal action against Britain for unilaterally changing trading agreements for Northern Ireland. Yeah, EU's coming after you. You made an agreement to exit Brexit, and now you have to follow the rules. And after enduring weeks of unprecedented seismic tremors, I think they're tremblers, sleepless Icelanders await a spectacular volcanic eruption. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is our chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and Kelly is very busy out there in real life, and she does a lot more for us. So thank you, Kelly, for everything that you do. If you would then look across the page, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com to the left, then hopefully you'll notice that Patreon link. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, you will help us continue this now decade-long endeavor to resist where resistance is needed. I mentioned earlier today on social media that, my mission statement is very simple. Love everybody that you can and kick the shit out of the Nazis. It's a very simple statement. Our mission is to resist the Nazi takeover of the United States of America. And you and your generosity has allowed us to do so. How can you do so? Well, if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and send those funds to us once a month, Then we pool that money with others and our own. We pay our bills, which then allows us to fly under the radar, surprisingly, and continue resisting this Nazi takeover of the United States of America. We cannot let it happen. And sitting back on our haunches is not doing the work that will prevent it. So we raise our voices, and we do a little bit more, too. But thank you for your generosity. As I mentioned, we've been doing this for 10 years, 24/7, 365. Yeah, we're the little powerhouse that could, and we did. And we are. So thank you for all of that generosity. We're going to keep it up. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. And he's pretty busy in real life, too. Thank you, Tom, for taking care of us. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, and I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime and get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms, so follow me. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, is Out of the American Independent by Amy Lou. A federal judge ruled that U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and the National Archives and Records Administration must preserve sexual assault and death files on detained immigrants. 3 watchdog groups, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, affectionately known as CREW, the American Historical Association, and the Society for Historians of American Foreign Relations, brought the lawsuit against the federal agencies in March of 2020, arguing that the records have significant research value. Judge Emmett P. Mehta ruled in favor of the groups, writing in a 21-page memorandum that the files must be preserved under the Federal Records Act. The ruling prevents the destruction of documents on the reporting and investigation of sexual abuse or assault allegations between detained immigrants or between ICE employees, contractors, or volunteers and detained immigrants. The files include police reports, medical exam summaries, supporting memos and video, any evidentiary materials related to the allegation, and related outcomes according to the court memo. Files containing reports on circumstances surrounding the death of detained immigrants also need to be preserved, the judge ruled. Those records include investigative reports, witness statements, immigration and medical records, photographs, and audio or video recordings, as well as death certificates and autopsy reports. Noah Bookbinder, president of CREW, said in a statement that the ruling was a win for transparency. There have been too many abuses documented in our immigration detention system, but the country cannot fix these problems without knowing what has happened. The issue of the records destruction first came to light in October of 2015 when I submitted a request to the National Archives and Records Administration to destroy the files. In July of 2017, under the Trump administration, the National Archives Agency requested public comment on its proposed schedule to dispose of the records, for which it received approximately 25,000 responses. During that time, 28 members of Congress signed a letter urging the agency to err on the side of preservation of the ICE files, saying the relatively recent government restructuring of our immigration agencies, the increased centrality of immigration in American public debate, and strong congressional attention to this issue indicate that the treatment of immigrants will be of high historical and research value. And of course, they don't want that to come back and bite them in the rear. They don't. Look what happened in Nuremberg. Now, the ACLU also submitted a petition arguing that the records offer a critical window into the treatment of immigrants in the United States and proof of mistreatment endured by people in detention. A request for a second round of public comments occurred in June of 2019, for which the National Records Agency received multiple comments expressing concerns on the topic. Some worried that there would not be enough sufficient records available for historical and human rights research under the proposed disposal schedule. Professors from Durham University of the UK said the disposing of the records would have a demonstrable and negative impact upon academic research in the field. The Archivist Roundtable of Metropolitan New York also recommended the permanent preservation of the records. Following the public comments, the National Archives and Record Administration stood its ground and published a proposed schedule without further changes, indicated the sexual abuse and assault files would be destroyed in 25 years, and ICE's enforcement and removal of death review files would be disposed of in 20. Well, last Friday, the disposals were blocked after Judge Mehta found that the National Archives and Records Administration schedule was arbitrary and capricious because it failed to consider an important factor, the research value of the records, and failed to adequately respond to comments pointing out that it had failed to consider that factor. Well, I think it's because they know that pretty soon we're going to be joining the International Court. And what happens when you join the International Court? You can have your ass hauled off to The Hague for human rights abuses. Rebecca Boone of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Anti-government activist and seditious loon Ammon Bundy was arrested yesterday, Monday, after failing to attend his trial on charges that he trespassed during an Idaho legislative session last fall. Bundy did not appear in the courtroom because he was protesting outside the building instead, apparently angry in part over mask requirements put in place during the coronavirus pandemic. Well, too bad. Bundy was joined by about 24 other protesters, some holding signs with slogans like "Ammon stands for truth," and others yelling misinformation and conspiracy theories about the COVID-19 pandemic, popularized by groups like QAnon. The Idaho Supreme Court has ordered that everyone wear masks while inside state courtrooms in an effort to slow the spread of COVID-19. The Ada County Sheriff's Office said both Bundy and another man expected to appear for a jury trial on trespassing charges, Aaron Von Schmidt, refused to wear masks so they could enter the courthouse for their trials. After the judge issued arrest warrants because the men failed to appear, a deputy asked both men if they would voluntarily turn themselves in. Well, both men refused, and so then they got arrested. When a team of deputies then tried to make the arrests, the protesters resisted. You know, the law and order people resisted the cops. The Ada County Sheriff's Office said. Deputies said Bundy laid down on the ground and refused to move, while other protesters locked arms to try to impede the deputies' approach. A third man, 69-year-old Casey J. Baker of Nampa, was ultimately arrested on suspicion of battering a law enforcement officer, and a fourth man was issued a citation after deputies said he resisted and obstructed officers. A fifth person who wasn't involved in the confrontation with deputies got caught up in the crowd and fell down, hitting his head on the ground. That person was taken to a hospital for treatment. In other words, injuries occurred because Ammon Bundy resisted the cops. Bundy and his followers of his People's Rights Organization have frequently protested coronavirus-related measures in southwestern Idaho since the pandemic began, including the protests at the State House last August that originally led to Bundy's arrest on the trespassing charges. In one of the August protests, angry, unmasked protesters forced their way into a house gallery with limited seating, shattering a glass door in the process. The next day, more than 100 protesters shouted down and forced from the room lawmakers on a committee considering a bill to shield businesses and government agencies from coronavirus-related liability. In other words, they were interrupting the legal process of democracy. They caused an insurrection. They are insurgents. Well, Bundy was arrested for trespassing when he wouldn't leave the room, and again the next day when he returned to the State House despite a 1-year ban. So it took him all this time to throw him in jail. Bundy is representing himself in this criminal case because that's the kind of guy he is. You know what they say, only idiots represent themselves. Shortly after his August arrest, he told Judge David Manweiler that he doesn't believe his actions at the Idaho State House were illegal. And he claims the state doesn't have legal standing to charge him with a crime anyway. Well, you know what, Ammon? You're on LSD. The real world's gonna run you over like a truck. Staff bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. The Tennessee Senate yesterday, Monday, advanced a proposal that would remove a clause in the state's constitution allowing slavery or involuntary servitude as punishment for a crime. Currently, the Tennessee Constitution states that slavery and involuntary servitude, except as punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, are forever prohibited in this state. Under the proposal, voters will have the option to delete that section and replace it by clearly stating that slavery and involuntary servitude is banned throughout Tennessee. An additional line would be added to note that nothing in this section shall prohibit an inmate from working when the inmate has been duly convicted of a crime. The explanation was added at the request of the Department of Correction. The resolution passed in the GOP-dominant Senate with only 4 Republicans opposing. Senator Brian Kelsey, a white Republican from Memphis, argued that the resolution would send a fake history message to voters that Tennessee's Constitution permits slavery. He further argued that the resolution doesn't do anything before voting against the proposed amendment. There's a difference between working and slavery, countered Senator Ramush Akbari, a black Democrat also from Memphis. I've worked. I've never been a slave. Amending the state constitution is a lengthy process in Tennessee. Proposed changes must pass a majority in both chambers during one 2-year General Assembly and then pass by at least 2/3 of the vote in the next. The amendment would then go before the voters in the year of the next gubernatorial election, which is in 2022. Well, that's not so far away. And that also brings us to our break. And why don't we do that? And, well, of course, when we get back from that break, you know we will go through weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, Lady Sings the Truth. Despite her 20th century fame, not a lot is known about Billie Holiday's real backstory. Indeed, when asked about claims in her own autobiography, she said, "I never read that book." Lee Daniels, The United States versus Billie Holiday, may not get everything right, but it is on point concerning the unceasing FBI harassment she endured literally to her deathbed. It's debatable that they were motivated by her anti-lynching anthem, Strange Fruit, as posited here, but from what is known of J. Edgar Hoover, it can't be ruled out. Holiday, as portrayed here, is the epitome of a tortured artist. Despite possessing an amazing voice and loads of charisma, Holiday struggled with drug addiction, toxic partners, and bad decisions. Despite her faults, though, the racial and political targeting she endured was untoward. Racist FBI agent Harry Anslinger, a holdover from Prohibition, targets her under the guise of the war on drugs and the additional pretext of the Strange Fruit song. Adding to the plot is a black undercover FBI agent who befriends Holiday but ultimately betrays her. Watching this one, the thought occurs that at the writing stage, the producers may not have known what they had in their untested lead, Andra Day. She's an R&B singer not only with singing chops but with acting ability, portraying going from glamorous to strung out in a way that belies her experience. Known earlier, a better movie may have emerged, with more emphasis on Holiday's life and art and less on the politics. The recent Judas and the Black Messiah kinda just went there. Day is the real reason to watch this, and she's already won the Best Actress Golden Globe. The United States versus Billie Holiday likely takes the liberties many biopics do. Nonetheless, it's worth a watch. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
Hi, and welcome to COVID Quickly, a new Scientific American podcast series.
This is your fast-track update on the COVID pandemic. We bring you up to speed on the science behind the most urgent questions about the virus and the disease. We demystify the research, and we help you understand what it really means.
I'm Tanya Lewis.
And I'm Josh Fishman.
And we're Scientific American's senior health editors. Today, we're going to be talking about the new Johnson & Johnson vaccine, the race between declining cases and the rise of new virus variants, and new ideas about why the virus may trigger diabetes.
Tanya, we have a new vaccine and it seems to work. Who made it, and has the FDA authorized it yet?
That's right. The shot is made by Johnson & Johnson, and it works. According to data submitted to the FDA, it had 72% efficacy in the U.S. clinical trial, and 64% in the South Africa trial, where a worrisome new virus variant has been circulating. It also seems to protect against severe disease, with 86% efficacy in the US and 82% in South Africa. In addition, the vaccine may also prevent transmission of the virus to unvaccinated people, although data are not yet conclusive.
Now just wait a sec, you said shot when you started talking, not shots?
That's right. Unlike some of the other vaccines out there, Johnson & Johnson's is just one shot, and it can be stored at room temperature for up to 3 months. The biggest hurdle right now is making enough doses. But the FDA Advisory Committee is meeting right now, and the vaccine could be approved very soon. There's some good news about COVID cases worldwide, Josh, but some other not-so-good news. What's going on?
Well, good news is that since mid-January, case rates have been dropping. Hospitalization rates have dropped too. For example, in the U.S., cases have dropped 30% during the past 2 weeks. The United Kingdom has seen a similar trend. And this, epidemiologists think, is really all about us being careful. Less group gatherings, activity restrictions that local governments put in place after that very scary Christmas spike in cases and deaths. And we're all wearing masks more often.
Well, that's good to hear, but what's the bad news?
Well, the not-so-great news is that several variants are showing up that may be more transmissible and may resist antibodies created by your immune system and even some of the vaccines. I spoke with Vaughn Cooper, an evolutionary biologist at the University of Pittsburgh, who has found more variants with mutations at the same spot on the virus. He thinks they appear because they help the virus to survive and to replicate. Scientists think we're okay now, but the big push is to get more shots in more arms to to slow the rise of even more variants. Finally, you've learned about some new connections between the virus and another disease, right, Tanya?
That's right, Josh. Diabetes is a known risk factor for severe COVID. But now, many doctors are reporting that COVID may actually cause new diabetes diagnoses. Some experts think the novel coronavirus may infect the insulin-producing beta cells in the pancreas, but this idea is somewhat controversial. Another possibility is that the viral infection causes diabetes symptoms, or that steroids, which are used to treat severe COVID and can raise blood sugar, may be having a similar effect. Finally, these new COVID-related diabetes cases may just be existing disease that doctors hadn't yet diagnosed. We don't yet know what's going on, but scientists are urgently investigating. Now you're up to speed. Thanks for joining us.
Come back in 2 weeks for the next episode of COVID Quickly, and check out SciAm.com for updated and in-depth COVID news.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. Occasional aches and pains are an expected part of life, but for many people, pain is a constant companion. Dr. Chad Helmick is with CDC's National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. He's joining us today to discuss ways to manage chronic pain. Welcome to the show, Chad.
Thank you.
Chad, how many people in the U.S. suffer from chronic pain?
In 2016, 50 million adults had chronic pain, which is pain on most or every day in the past 6 months. More interesting, though, is that 20 million people have high-impact chronic pain, which is chronic pain that also limits their work or life activities on most or every day in the past 6 months. This is a problem because chronic pain is associated not only with symptoms, but with anxiety and depression, reduced quality of life, and the risk of opioid problems.
What are the most common causes of chronic pain?
The most common causes generally relate to bones and joints, like low back pain and arthritis, but there are many other causes: headaches, sickle cell disease, fibromyalgia, surgery and injuries, and many, many others.
Is chronic pain more common in any particular group of people?
Yes, it occurs at all ages, but it's more common in older middle-aged adults and in the oldest 85 and older. It's also more common in women, poor people, and those who live in rural areas.
How is chronic pain treated?
Well, the first thing to do is to get a diagnosis, which can help guide treatment. But the thinking about chronic pain now is that it becomes a chronic disease by itself, regardless of the cause, and that can cause significant problems. The real goal in management is to have a manageable level of pain, not to get rid of all pain. There's several steps that can be taken, and these are sometimes difficult to do because of barriers to access. But it makes sense to do the simplest and safest things first. And these are non-drug steps. Things like physical activity. Walking is perfectly good to help reduce pain. Also, self-management education can give you some confidence in managing chronic pain when you're on your own. There's also physical therapy, occupational therapy, psychological therapy, better sleep, which usually means less alcohol, and seeing a chiropractor or getting biofeedback and massage. If that's not enough, non-opioid drugs like Tylenol or Motrin and Advil or naproxen or Aleve can help. If those don't work, then it's time to consider something stronger. Sometimes that's opioids, but there's not great evidence that opioids are good for long-term pain in most people.
Do you have any advice for people suffering from chronic pain?
Well, it's important to work with a variety of providers who are working together to help you. The goal, again, is manageable pain so you can live a productive life. This can include physical therapy, most people can walk, to treat any underlying depression or anxiety, and to avoid further injuries. Finally, the National Pain Strategy is laying out a strategic roadmap to improve pain management system in this country.
Where can listeners get more information about managing chronic pain?
Listeners can go to the NIH website, nih.gov, and type in National Pain Strategy.
Thanks, Chad. I've been talking today with Dr. Chad Helmick about ways to manage chronic pain. If you're experiencing daily pain, talk with your healthcare provider to ensure you have the correct diagnosis and know how to manage your condition. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Kathleen Dooling for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
In less than a year, COVID-19 has killed more than 500,000 people in the United States, more than the total number of American battlefield deaths in World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War combined. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. In 1776, the Declaration of Independence proclaimed that we were endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The founders then adapted that inspirational statement into the Constitution by providing in the Bill of Rights the guarantee that the federal government could not deny any person life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Then, after the Civil War, the 14th Amendment expanded and enshrined that promise, guaranteeing that no state shall deny any person due process or equal protection. But as COVID-19 stalks the land, it mocks the idea of due process and equal protection. Over 80% of the deaths are people 65 and older, and communities of color have suffered the most. The 500,000 COVID deaths demonstrate that public health and environmental justice are critical civil rights and civil liberties struggles of our time, and that there is not a moment to lose. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1911. That was the day Big Bill Haywood of the Industrial Workers of the World gave his speech on the general strike. He presented it in New York City at a fundraiser for the Bucafori Defense Fund. Vincent Bucafori was a shop representative for his union. He faced repeated harassment and discharge by his foreman for executing his union duties. Finally, as witnesses described, the foreman fired Bucafori and punched him, drawing blood. Then he came at Bucafori with a heavy object. Bucafori shot and killed him in self-defense. He was charged with manslaughter, convicted, and sentenced to 10 years at Sing Sing prison. The IWW raised money for his defense and fought for his acquittal and release. Haywood arrived at the fundraiser to deliver the keynote speech titled The General Strike. In it, he reviewed the rich history of workers' actions since the days of the Paris Commune in 1871. He also raged against electoral reform. He stated, quote, "The broadest interpretation of political power comes through the industrial organization. It gives the vote to women. It re-enfranchises the black man and places the ballot in the hands of every boy and girl employed in a shop. Makes them eligible to take part in the general strike. Makes them eligible to legislate for themselves where they are most interested in changing conditions, namely in the place where they work." He continued, quote, You have all the industries in your hands at the present time. There is justification for political action, and that is to control the forces of the capitalists that they use against us. That is the reason that you should fully understand the power of the ballot. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, because there's lots more of America where we come from. It is currently 26 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting to be a tad warmer than yesterday. Looks like we'll be in the mid-50s. Partly cloudy skies with winds light and variable. Some clouds overnight with lows in the low 30s, winds remaining light and variable. And then mostly cloudy skies early tomorrow with highs in the 60s. Low 60s. Becoming partly cloudy later in the day with winds light and variable. And then it looks like by Thursday we may have about about a third of an inch of rain. And then snow later on towards the weekend. We'll see how that turns out. Confirmed cases of coronavirus now stand at 8,807 here in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon, with deceased standing at 120. Pollen is still rated as none here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good, come down a few parts per million to 30 parts per million. And that daytime UV index is moderate, though it has ticked up another notch, this time to 5. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.19 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 96%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. London is 56 and cloudy. Paris is 49 and cloudy. Rome is 54 and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 46 and fair. Kabul is 55 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 70 degrees and clear. Tokyo is 58 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 68 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 43 degrees and sunny. And New York is a freezing 32 degrees Fahrenheit, but it's fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. Philip Blenkinsop of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The European Union launched legal action against Britain on Monday yesterday for unilaterally changing trading agreements for Northern Ireland that Brussels says breached the Brexit divorce deal agreed with London last year. LeBlanc has sent a letter of formal notice to kickstart an infringement procedure, which could lead to fines being imposed by the EU's top court, although that could be at least a year off, leaving time for a solution to be found. Britain's withdrawal agreement with the EU leaves the British-ruled province of Northern Ireland in the EU single market for goods, and so requires checks on goods arriving there from other parts of the UK. Some of those checks are meant to start when a grace period expires at the end of March. The plans have already disrupted some supplies reaching supermarkets in Northern Ireland. Britain says it intends to extend the grace period unilaterally until October 1st, a decision the EU letter demands it reverses. Britain said it has not violated the agreement and that it would reply to the EU's legal action in due course. The U.S. called on both sides to preserve the Good Friday Accord, protecting peace in Northern Ireland, with the White House urging them to, quote, prioritize pragmatic solutions, end quote. Marko Sefcovic, the top EU official in charge of UK relations, has also sent a separate letter to British counterpart David Frost, seeking talks in good faith to resolve the issue this month. Prime Minister Boris Johnson said the extension was simply a technical decision aimed at being fair. The protocol, he said, should guarantee trade between Britain and Northern Ireland as well as across Northern Ireland's land border with Ireland. That's all we are trying to sort out, with some temporary and technical measures, which we think are very sensible. But obviously, we'll look forward to our discussions with our EU friends and see where we get to, Boris Johnson sneered.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Nikolaj Skydasgaard and Jacob Gronholt Peterson bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Icelanders are yearning for some undisturbed shut-eye after tremors from tens of thousands of earthquakes have rattled their sleep for weeks in what scientists call an unprecedented seismic event, which might well end in a spectacular volcanic eruption. At the moment, we are feeling it constantly. It's like you're walking over a fragile suspension bridge, a lifelong resident in the town of Grandavik told Reuters. Grandavik lies in the southern part of the Reykjanes Peninsula, a volcanic and seismic hotspot, where more than 40,000 earthquakes have occurred since February 24th, exceeding the total of number of earthquakes registered there in all of last year. Located between the Eurasian and North American tectonic plates, Iceland frequently experiences earthquakes as the plates slowly drift in opposite directions at a pace of around 2 centimeters each year. The source of the past week's earthquakes is a large body of molten rock known as magma, moving roughly 1 kilometer beneath a peninsula as it tries to push its way to the surface. We've never seen so much seismic activity, Sarah Barsotti, volcanic hazards coordinator at the Icelandic Meteorological Office, told Reuters. Some of those quakes clocked in at magnitudes as high as 5.7. Everyone here is so tired, a 5th grade school teacher said. When I go to bed at night, all I think about is, am I going to get any sleep tonight? Many in the town have visited relatives, spent time in summer houses, or even rented a hotel room in Reykjavik, the capital, just to get a break and a good night's sleep. Experts are expecting lava to erupt from fissures in the ground, possibly resulting in spectacular lava fountains, which could exceed 20 to 100 meters in the air. Already last year, authorities put an emergency plan in place for Grandavik. One option includes putting locals on boats in the North Atlantic if an eruption shuts roads to the remote town. I trust The authorities will keep us informed and evacuate us, a townsperson said. I'm not scared, just tired, indeed. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we'll meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.